I've mentioned this a time or two, but I grew up reading comic books, mostly Spider-Man and the X-Men, so I'm at least a little interested in seeing whatever Disney and Marvel Studios are going to try to pull off with their new movie, Avengers Doomsday, which comes out on December 18th of this year. But like a lot of people, I was a little surprised last week when Disney Plus released a list of 15 movies and shows you need to watch to be able to understand the plot of this upcoming 3-hour film. Now, to be fair, this is Disney Plus, the streaming service that's trying to get you to watch more of its content, so you'll keep your subscription, and the hyperbolic news pieces that have been going around talking about how Marvel is assigning us a bunch of homework is, well, a made-up controversy intended to stir the pot. But you know what? Let me read the list that they put out. Okay, so first movie to watch is X-Men, and this is the one where they're wearing all the black leather suits. It came out when I was in college, the first time in college. Then there's X2, which is the sequel, and I don't even think I'd met my wife when this one came out. And you know, we've been married for over 20 years, so that was a while ago. Then there's Captain America, the First Avenger, and honestly, I'm not sure why you need to watch this one again. I think we all know who Captain America is by now, and surprisingly, this list doesn't include any of the Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, or Black Widow movies, and you know what? They're all the Avengers too. What about the Avengers, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame? Okay, that's 3 of the 4, but no Avengers Age of Ultron, huh? I guess that kind of affirms what I've always said. That movie really never needed to be made. Okay, what about Loki? Well, that's a TV series, and it's a decent one, actually. It's 2 seasons. I recommend it. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I mean, honestly, I don't care about Shang-Chi. I can't imagine caring about Shang-Chi. Moving on. Spider-Man, No Way Home. Well, it's not the most recent Spider-Man movie, and it's not even one of the really good ones. Honestly, this is the one with the multiverse shenanigans, and it was fine, I guess. I don't want to watch it again. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. You know, as much as I love the first Black Panther movie, and I really do, I never even really thought about seeing this one. Maybe I should watch it sometime? I don't know. It looked okay. Captain America, Brave New World. Well, that was the Captain America movie that nobody liked, so hard pass on that one. Deadpool and Wolverine. You know, that was a fun one. I enjoyed that movie, but why do I need to watch it exactly to understand Doomsday? What about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, starring my doppelganger, Benedict Cumberbatch? Well, you know, as much as I do like him, I'm really tired of all the multiverse stuff. I mean, isn't everybody at this point? What about the Thunderbolts? Well, that one has an asterisk at the end of the title because, and this is a spoiler alert, at the very end of the movie, you find out that they're the new Avengers. I honestly cannot remember a single one of these characters by name, so yeah. And then there's the Fantastic Four First Steps, and this was like our, I think it was our 4th attempt at making a movie franchise out of the Fantastic Four. I do get the nostalgia for the older Marvel fans, but by the time I was reading comics, the Fantastic Four was about as dated as Westerns, Woodstock, and disco. There was a reason that the cool geeks were reading X-Men and Spider-Man in the 1990s, and the really cool ones, by the way, weren't reading Marvel at all. They were reading Spawn or something else. Okay, so watching 14 movies in a show so you can grasp the intricacies of a 3-hour movie sure sounds like a lot, but I'm going to guess the diehard fans have already seen them anyway. But for those of us who just want to, you know, go watch a movie, Spider-Man Brand New Day is out. It's made $2 billion already, and it's not only a reboot of that whole can of worms, but requires no homework, and it has Tom Holland and Zendaya in it besides. Oh, and add it to the list, by the way, of movies you need to watch before Doomsday, because it does feature one of the original X-Men in a surprise role. I guess the question I want to address today is whether most moviegoers will even bother with all this preparation. Honestly, it sounds exhausting, doesn't it? My feeling is probably not, because we have a concept in marketing that already describes this phenomenon in detail. It's called involvement, and let's see how it impacts how much or how little homework we're willing to do outside of school. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this is the Marketing Gateway. So involvement is a term we use in marketing strategy to talk about how much or how little research people are willing to do about a product or service category before purchasing. It might also describe their conviction for how convicted they needed to be, okay? I've looked into this to try to figure out where the term first came from in marketing, and it appears to have first been popularized by an annotated speech appearing as an article in 1965 called The Impact of Television Advertising: Learning Without Involvement by Herbert E. Krugman and the Public Opinion Quarterly. Now, I actually don't get the sense that Krugman invented the term. He cites earlier research from the 1950s that uses the term ego involvement, but his speech is trying to explain why people do and don't pay attention to certain television ads and why there's this sort of U-shaped level of interest in them. And he discusses in the speech and in the accompanying piece how when information is novel, it's trivia, filling in a gap in knowledge. But when you bombard people with it, they don't necessarily become more persuadable or interested in it. It's only when they want to be interested, perhaps because they're considering the category the ad touches upon, that they begin paying closer attention. Okay, so that's all very interesting, but the real credit for making this a more common marketing concept might go to Richard Vaughan, who in 1980 published a 2x2 grid known as the FCB grid. And it breaks our informational needs down into thinking and feeling on the x-axis, and low involvement and high involvement on the y-axis, with involvement in this case meaning how much effort and research we put into learning something. So if we're looking to learn something in an informative manner, we take a thinking approach with a high level of involvement. That's what we call a rational method. But if we're just trying to get the gist of it in a habitual manner, we can try the low involvement approach, where we just try something and repeat a task over and over. And that is also rational, but it involves less research. If we want to flip over to the emotional side of things, high involvement and high feeling leads us to what we call an effective manner of acquiring information or figuring out what we like. And low involvement with feelings lands us in what we call a satisfaction manner, which is figuring out what makes us happy in the moment. So going to see a movie, just in general, is going to fall under all four of these things, really, because depending on the person, there's different motivations, right? Someone who reads reviews before they commit to buying a ticket is going to be in the high involvement category, and what they get out of it is really going to depend on the kind of stimulation that they expect. Someone who just likes to go to the movies or who doesn't care about the details before going in is going to wind up in the low involvement half of the quadrant. So, as you can probably already see, the FCB grid's main problem is that it doesn't have a lot of empirical evidence to support it. So one group of advertising researchers and textbook authors, John Rossiter and Larry Percy, tried to improve it in 1987 with a paper that suggested tossing out thinking and feeling, because they're kind of vaguely defined, and instead having consumers weigh things informationally or transformationally, depending on their level of involvement. But they also added an important presupposition. Consumers had to be aware of a brand to have an attitude towards it, which kind of seems logical, right? So let's say someone has a low need for research or a low conviction, and they just need to select a brand to solve a problem. Like maybe, figuring out which aspirin to buy. So what they're going to do is they're going to rely on an informational framework to eliminate their choices until they find the one they want. But if they have low involvement and they need to get a positive benefit in some way, like, maybe purchasing a candy bar or a treat, then what they would do is rely on a transformational approach. They're going to change their mood. Likewise, in the realm of high involvement, if they're solving a problem with a new home appliance or renovation, it's informational because they're solving a problem. But if they're buying a new car or going on a vacation, that's going to be transformational because they're doing something positive. In this framework, we can at least understand what going to see a movie is going to fall under that positive or transformational side of the grid. But again, there are people who just go and see movies, and there are people who study up on them before they go and see them. So where would Avengers Doomsday even fit in? It really kind of depends on the person, doesn't it? Fortunately, the Rossiter-Percy matrix does offer some tactics for a transformational need. So we see that people want sensory gratification, which is going from dull to elated. They want intellectual stimulation, which is going from bored to excited. And they want social approval, going from apprehensive to included. And aha! This is where we can see if Disney Plus's Avengers Doomsday strategy of assigning us homework before we go see the new movie makes any sense at all. Okay, so sensory gratification is something any new movie can provide. But let's also assume that Disney Plus picked those specific movies and that show, Loki, because these are the ones that most closely match the spectacle of what they're going to be releasing in December. Not the content, but the look and feel and the action and all that stuff. In other words, they're priming the audience to develop a craving for more of what they've already delivered in those previous films and shows. And, I could actually see how that might work. So maybe this whole idea has more to it than I realized. Let's keep going, okay? So then there's intellectual stimulation, and it's sort of the stock and trade of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? I mean, I don't think that these movies are particularly intellectual on their own because they're really not. They're kind of jokey and referential, but, they have all these little hooks and connections and deep references and background elements that are meant to be the connective tissue to keep people interested. And yes, if you have to watch 14 films and a 2-season show to be able to catch all those elements in the new film, and maybe you have a PhD in reading Marvel comic books beside that, that is at least going to be intellectually interesting when the movie comes out, right? Just feeling all those synapses fire as you recognize things that you have already seen. Okay, so on to the next tactic, which involves social approval. And yeah, I don't think this one's actually going to work beyond maybe, your fellow MCU fanatics in a Reddit community or something, because insisting on doing the assigned Disney Plus homework to go see an Avengers movie in December is going to get you the opposite of social approval. Take it from someone who grew up reading comics, okay? It might even get some concern circulating among your friends and family that maybe you need to get outside a little more and touch some grass, or maybe find some new friends or start dating, or probably take up a different hobby entirely, right? And this is where the Disney Plus strategy falls apart for me, at least in this framework, because the benefit of all of that homework means preparing yourself for a 3-hour movie event that's going to generate some personal, momentary euphoria, perhaps, but which also might make you a little too invested in something that, quite honestly, most theater goers are going to approach from a low involvement framework of, you know what, I need to get out of my house. Let's go see that new Marvel movie. Also, there's the chance that the movie pulls another Age of Ultron and turns out to disappoint fans of the Avengers. You might view all that time as being wasted and then develop negative attitudes towards the brand. And this is one of the reasons why the thinking on involvement and marketing strategy has moved away from that advertising sort of persuasion and into more of a consumer behavior model. In classrooms today, we typically teach a refined version of multiple models that essentially says, you know what, consumers tend to spend more time researching unfamiliar or higher priced products, and they tend to be more routine or habitual purchasers of low-priced or very familiar products. Now, not always, but often enough that it holds true pretty much most of the time. So under that framework, I would argue that Disney Plus's assigned homework is actually the wrong strategy. This is the 5th Avengers movie, and we've had dozens more Marvel Cinematic Universe films and shows. Anybody who wants that experience pretty much knows what they're getting. They don't need to be told what to watch to prepare. And anyone who doesn't care anymore isn't going to be enticed back in with the promise that if they watch 50 hours of content before December 18th, they're going to be ready for the next big thing. So, predictably, the response to Disney Plus's list of homework has been to make fun of it and to discuss all the films and shows that didn't make the cut, despite Marvel Studios making it seem like every one of them was part of this vast, interconnected universe and essential to consume. But audiences caught on a while ago, and that's why they didn't show up for things like the Eternals or the Marvels or the Thunderbolts asterisk or anything like that, the same way that they have for the most recent Spider-Man movie, which is really pretty much content to just be its own thing. And that is not a fluke, by the way. Nobody assigned people to read Homer before they went to see the Odyssey this summer, and it has also done pretty amazingly well. Because it turns out, for most people, going to the movies isn't about reading up on reviews or trying to catch every installment of a franchise or making sure that they catch every possible reference that shows up in a film. Now, for most people, it's just about the very low involvement need to be entertained for a few hours. Well, I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this has been the Marketing Gateway. See you next time. This month's plug is for KidSmart, a charitable organization based here in St. Louis, Missouri, with the mission of empowering children in need to succeed academically. And as we head back to school season, KidSmart will be out there handing out $104 million in school supplies to around 80,000 kids in the St. Louis area. They also operate a free education supply store and have a truck that brings school supplies directly into neighborhoods in need. As you might imagine, August is their Super Bowl, and they need both financial and volunteer support this month. So go to kidsmartstl.org to learn more.